Hello everyone and welcome to the Kittens of War Gaming Podcast, the gaming podcast where the Kittens of War gaming community talk all things video games. I am your host. My name, if you are asking, is Turbo Tony. We're here with Hey Swanboat and T-Mug Tom. I love to call them the cornerstones of this podcast. Say hi to the masses, people.
Hello, masses.
No!
Hello. That's what we're going to call our listeners now, masses. And I hate if we say that to people that have like genuine eating disorders and stuff. That would be really odd.
No, I just find it ironic because we don't yet have the mass subscriber population yet, and it's just
don't tell them that. Don't tell them that. You have to promote yourself as if you're the biggest thing in the world. That's what you.
Oh, the people come listen to us.
They flock.
Observe, witness our glory and greatness. Oh Jesus!
The people flock to us because we're magnetic. Oh. That's what it's all about.
I almost gave myself a headache there. Jesus!
Don't get a brain aneurysm there.
People are drawn to our awesomenicity.
Yeah, that's it. Awesomenicity. I like that. That's good. How are you guys this week?
Not too bad. Not too bad at all.
I have been indoctrinated into Minecraft.
Indoctrinated. One of us. One of us. You're enjoying it.
And I've made the best building ever. So, yeah.
Yeah, you have. I've seen it.
You can end the game now because you just made the best building ever. You've won Minecraft.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, we've been talking about loads, obviously, with the Kittens having the Minecraft server up. I've not had a lot of time, and the only thing I built on there is the outskirts of a really badly designed house. So
yeah, it's just a ruin, an ancient church from the 1400s, and it's just a ruin.
I'm glad it at least looks like something, because at least that's a plus. To me,
bombed out church in Plymouth, that's what it looks like.
I may just put up here, just a ruin and make my thing elsewhere because it's just looking like a complete mess. Comparison to what everyone else has made, we've got all these grand stuff, and I'm just all I've got is I don't even have a wall of a house yet. I'm just this is so pathetic. But still. Gaming experience for the week. Oh, before I get into that, I need to advise our listeners what we're going to be talking about this week, because it is a doozy of a discussion that we're going to have, and it was brought about an article that was brought to our attention throughout the week by Tom. So you can take all credit for that, Tom. Go and take all the credit. Yeah, you win the Kitten Podcast for the week. That's the way it works.
Yeah.
And it involves, in a nutshell, a large discussion in regards to Kickstarter games, or the Kickstarter movement. That happened in a big boom of Kickstarter projects that happened, and it became such a trend. South Park even satire, did a satire, the whole thing, and that was also early access on Steam. So these games are basically people are paying money for an incomplete game, which sometimes can work, as we were talking about Minecraft. Funny enough, that's quite a cool example. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it just doesn't outright, and you don't. We get to a situation of which the article that you told us with, and basically it's an article done by Rock Paper Scissors, the website, gaming journalists, and they spoke to Peter Molyneux, who we've also spoken about here on this podcast before, as being a guy who likes to talk a bit of shit, and we've always said that before.
I think it's a bit harsh to say talk shit. It's just he lets his mouth run off. He lets his mouth run, and he just gets overexcited that he doesn't stop to think, oh, hang on, maybe I shouldn't talk about things that haven't quite happened yet.
Is it the case that he has to have a very, very large pillow to fit his head on?
I would state that he's still talking shit. Even though you've eloquently described it, I would explain why I think he's talking shit. It doesn't matter whether he believes or not. He believes in his shit, but it's still shit. So we'll go into that.
Gotta give him credit though, because he is
stand by his shit. Yeah.
Actually, I would advise I won't give the guy credit, and we'll go into this, right? Because I like the fact that you're more defensive on it, because it's very easy to jump on the bandwagon. Let's talk about it anyway. So essentially, the interview was regarding Goddess, which is a game that he started through Kickstarter 3 years ago, and essentially it's been a mess ever since. And the interview was done. He did, the interviewer, I think it was John Walker, I think his name is. Apologies if I got that wrong. He did the entire transcribe of the interview, exactly what was said all the way through it. And he was very, I wouldn't say aggressive, but he was very cutthroat in this interview. I think have you guys both? I know Tom obviously have you read the article, the interview, Hayley?
I have not, I'm afraid.
Okay.
So I wouldn't describe it as cutthroat. I just think it was just straight up balls to the walls. We're not sugarcoating this. Let's just talk about it how it is.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was direct. Maybe is probably the best word.
Direct is a good way to describe it.
Yeah. I've got the entire interview up on my screen now, and we're going to be talking majority about that, but also going to, as we go through some of the the things that were stated here in the interview, we're going to talk about our own experiences with Kickstarter and early access, and talk about the whole idea of paying for a game that isn't complete. And it's something that's come up, and I'd state that Minecraft was the thing that birthed all of this. It was really, in my opinion, the first game that allowed you to purchase an alpha with the promise that there would be a game delivered at a later date. And then obviously all this other stuff started up. So before we get into the actual... This is an awkward topic, right? And some people are going to be like, oh, you're going to jump on the bandwagon and blame people. Well, if that's what our intention is, and it probably, I imagine it's not all of our intention, at very least we'll try and explain exactly the reason why we think the way we feel. Before we start though, I'll try and word this a little bit interesting.
Eloquently?
Yeah, eloquently, yeah, for you guys. What was the last experience of... It doesn't have to be like early access or Kickstarter, it can be that, but a game that you purchased with the promise that later on this would be complete. Do you guys have any sort of interaction with games on a recent level of that kind?
Well, I know you and Tom have.
Yeah.
With the tank ones. What was that called?
Oh, Iron Brigade.
That's it.
See, that's different.
That was a PC port.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, the one that if you're talking about Double Fine Studios, then the one that still burns in my mind is Space Base DF9.
That's the other big one that they've had issues with, isn't it? That the game is like
that
outright
was
finished.
Double Fine Productions, and that was started on Kickstarter. It went on early access in Steam, and September last year, then Double Fine announced that they would just release it as a full game with half the features they talked about missing, and just releasing the source code so people can mod it, basically letting the fans fix their own mess.
Yeah.
Although they did say that they were going to stay on and keep with the bug fixes, but
they did the thing with them is that the one thing we've spoken about a little bit before, not since the reboot, but is that the Broken Age with Tim Schafer that was doing the point and click adventure, and they did the Kickstarter, and they got like a huge amount, over 1 million, right? And then they burnt it all out, and then they had to end up releasing it in 2 parts because they didn't have enough money to finish the game. It was like, where the hell are you hemorrhaging this much cash? It just made no sense.
We discussed the wine bar and such, didn't we?
Oh yeah, we did that. Yeah, you did that. I thought that was brilliant.
There's a wine bar around the corner and a couple of pubs across the road. As we Googled that.
There's a squash racket and a nightclub and a casino not too far away as well. It probably isn't a casino, but you know how it is.
Or at least they've been funding local businesses, shall we say. We don't want to make... Obviously, we're only joking about it. We obviously don't know for sure. But the thing about that, I think, is so funny. And I'm going to bring up the most latest game that I purchased and was involved in the development of was Broken Sword 5, which is the newest edition of Broken Sword. And this is going to be my example for Kickstarter games that suffer because other people mess it up, because they delivered a fully functioning 2-episode game and delivered on all their promises in terms of release dates and having the game be as a higher quality as the rest of the series. So like the guys at Revolution, who made Broken Sword, they delivered a brand new art style to the game. It was a game that was over 13 hours long, which is really good for a point-and-click adventure. And as I said, they met every expectations. They did everything that they were told. They were given a certain amount of money. They had stretch goals. They delivered on those stretch goals. And then in Kickstarter as well, with all these extra stuff, because that's one of the things that in the interview, that was a big talking point here with Peter Molyneux, is that, when you... have you guys ever done a Kickstarter before, where you put you obviously put money in? You know the basis of Kickstarter.
Yeah, I know the basis of Kickstarter.
I was going to for like a proper sized Barbie doll, but that's not a game.
Yeah.
Play with the Barbie doll. It was a Barbie. It was a doll.
Yeah.
That was like had.
Since I got burned with DF9, although to be fair, sometimes before that I was just a cheap bastard. I kept my eye on a few games from Kickstarter. One of them being Sunless Sea.
Yeah.
It's actually finished now and released full version on Steam, and it's got quite glowing reviews. Actually, they did what they said they were going to do. They've met their promises, and everyone's happy.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that is a big talking point with the interview is that you can choose on Kickstarter to pay whatever you want in terms of... So yeah, you could pay £5, let's just say. You get a copy of the game when it's released, and that's all you get. But you could technically, if you wanted to, pay 10 grand... Like, it go up that high, and you could get all these extra stuff, like jackets, books, a trip out to actually go see the developers, have your character in the game, all this other stuff, right? All these extras that you can get involved.
10 grand?
You could go up as high as some of them, yeah. If you were to pledge 10 grand, it's pretty crazy. But
a lot of game developers are just in their basements, right?
Some of them, but like stuff like Revolution and stuff, they have their own offices and some of that. But here's the thing, right? Is that... So if a lot of people that maybe would have paid like 50 or 100, they're promised actual, not just the game that you download, you get books and jackets and all this sort of stuff, and they get sent out. And like Revolution, who made Broken Sword, sent all their stuff out. And as far as I've heard, I have not heard a bad thing from them. Everything's done, completed. The game's done. It's out there. I played it last year. It was fine, no problem. So in that sense, I don't think there is any excuse when a developer takes longer than what they initially advertised on Kickstarter, which is exactly what we're talking about here with Goddess, with Peter Molyneux, and 22 Cans, which is the studio that he works for, or owns, sorry,
I don't think that Prison Architects was a Kickstarter.
Was
it a Kickstarter?
It was, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
that's an early access game, at least.
And they were selling things for 50 quid. We can buy it for 50 quid. And you could have a character and profile named after you and put in the game as one of the prisoners.
Yeah.
And that sold out really quickly. But that's one game that we've already been on. But that's still in early access.
Yeah. Like, the difference between...
They are constantly updating it every month. They're adding new features.
Not every month adding new features. I mean, they've added a few new things, new rooms. But they haven't done anything in regards to story. But there's a lot more. They've released they've got a workshop now as well for modders to do mods.
Yeah, I mean the difference between early access and Kickstarter is that you could pay money on a Kickstarter, you might not see that game for 2 years. Like with early access, at very least, you're getting a build of the game. It may not be a working build, but you're getting something when you purchase that through Steam. That's the two main. Essentially, it's still the same argument, but I know exactly what you mean. Now, people are going to ask, okay, you're going to talk about this interview. Have you purchased the game? No, because it looked dodgy from the outset. That was my opinion, right? It looked dodgy, big dodgy, when all this stuff was coming out. And as I said before, this isn't the first time that Peter Molyneux has stated something very outlandish, and then he's had to backpedal tons. I've seen it before. It's not the first time this has particularly happened. I think it's the worst situation that it's happened. But it wouldn't be the first. We were hearing from him tons of stuff about Fable having all these features, and they weren't in the final of Fable.
But then after the new one was starting to come out, he would turn around and just say, "Oh, the last one, that was awful. That was a complete mess of a game."
Yeah.
And then promised that the next one would be infinitely better, what he originally promised and more.
Yeah. He was telling us...
Continue.
Yeah, he was telling us that Fable 3 was going to be the greatest RPG of all time. And fair enough, if you believe that, fair enough. But there was a lot of stuff that he said that just were blowing his trumpet a little bit too much. And even developers, big-time developers, and we slate them huge on this podcast, the likes of EA, Ubisoft, who make some absolutely fucking stupid mistakes. At very least, they don't tell you stuff that's going to be in the game, and then it's not. At the very least, the mechanics will eventually be there, and it will be there within a couple of months of the game's launch. Very rarely that won't be the case, I mean, Assassin's Creed Unity was just a fucking mess, but you know what I mean? In regards to that, it's not as if, in Assassin's Creed Unity you get to play with 8 8, 12, 16 players online and it launches and you can only do 4. You know, that never happens with them because they have the legal department telling them you can't do that, you know. So, is there anything that you want to go into before we get into this lengthy interview and we start talking about the things that were said, and I do like a brief, you know, chat about not to take this whole shit too seriously on our end. So is there any other stuff that you want to talk about? Obviously, we can go in and out of your chats as things get propped up.
Well, I've never known anything about Godus, and I've just gone on the store page. It's got horribly negative reviews. It says user reviews mostly negative, and that's 4,334. And scrolling down to the reviews, the first one that pops out to me is just a middle finger. Someone's taking the time.
That after the article came out, a lot of hate was inspired by it.
Yeah.
Well, it's just someone's taking the time to do full stops, forward slashes, commas, apostrophes, and brackets to form a hand flipping off the developers.
How much is it on the store page?
It is $14.99.
$14.99 for an unfinished game that hasn't been finished in 3 years.
Can I just say as well?
Yeah.
Because I went on the store. Steam store, and typed in early access and went to highest price. The most expensive early access game on here is Hall of Fame Starter Pack, and it is £129.99.
See, a lot of them are like packs that you would get on like mobile games. And essentially that's what it is like an early access like mobile port that gives you like, oh, this gives you tons of shit and all that crap. It's a bit bothersome.
Well, it's like Brawl Hole Up is $75.99. Whack Fu or Gress Pack is $74.99. And I get that's a pack of multiple things, but it's still really expensive for an early access.
Yeah, early access game. Yeah, it is a bit ridiculous, and you know, it's everyone knows that with the Steam page at the moment, the early access stuff. There's been tons of story of games like Godus being on there and just never getting finished, like just outright, and leaving consumers really shit on. Right, let's go into the...
Just want to illustrate before we get started. We're not ragging on Peter Molyneux. I mean, he's good at what he does when he keeps his mouth shut.
I think a part of the issue is maybe he's not as good as he thinks he is. Now, let me do a precursor because I feel like you're trying to... I like what you're doing. Anything that we say here is all done to try and protect the consumers that purchase the game. I have no ill feelings towards anyone in the game's development. I don't know these people, you know, so there's no way that...
Can't call him an asshole because you don't know him personally.
Exactly, right? So anything here that we call him out on in terms of this interview is done in terms of his business practice and how we perceive it as such. Take it with a pinch of salt because, one, we don't have the game, and two, we're not games journalists, yeah? So if anyone wants to take it too far, these are just our thoughts on it. This is the reason why we do a gaming podcast, to give our thoughts on it. So...
This is just our opinion.
It's the state. Yeah, it's our opinion. It's to spark a debate about it. Okay. If we go too heavy, it's in regards to the situation, not the man himself. Okay. So we'll go into that. Before we begin, I would state that Peter Molyneux, the owner of 22 Cans and the head developer, you know, the creative lead on Godus and other games that he's also announced as well, seems like a man who has taken up too much and is suffering mentally because of it in terms of depression, and he makes a few references towards that. He seems like a guy who bit off more than he can chew.
And he's really feeling it.
Yes, and he looks like a guy that doesn't want to admit that he was wrong because he is basically got his back to the wall and he's trying to push back. But we'll talk about things that we're not going to go through. I mean, we're not going to do the entire thing, but we're going to talk about the, you know, what was stated here. So, the interview starts off with John Walker, who stated that he asks, "Do you think that you're a pathological liar?" And this all starts off essentially with, yeah, I know it's quite a harsh start to the interview, but it's in response to a lot of the deadlines and a lot of the stuff around the game not being released on time, and a lot of the Kickstarter rewards not being given. A lot of his response to that is, well, the game isn't finished. You know, so we can't send out the making of book until it's finished. So what do you guys think? Let's talk about that first. We're going in and out of this. What would you perceive as a length of time that you can't really pull the card of the game isn't finished? What would you perceive that to be if you were to into this Kickstarter?
I'm not a games designer and I'm not a games developer, so I can't comment as to what is a decent length of time, what is a adequate amount of sum to get the project you've aimed for going, because things can happen that can really just stretch the whole thing out to a 3-year basis, like similar to what happened here with Goddess. But I don't know, it's difficult to know. But Peter Molyneux's been in the industry he's been in it since the early 90s, as far as I'm aware. I think, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So he should have a measure of an idea. Because I did see the interview. I did read parts of it. He was just saying, "How could I have known? I couldn't possibly have known. I should have asked for a lot more. What could I have done?" It's just like, dude, you've been in the industry for quite a lengthy period of time. You have some experience. You have some basis, a good deal more than any of us do, as to what is a good amount and what you can achieve with it.
I think that's probably a really well-worded answer in terms of that. And I would agree with you. I think that the main issue is that when you go on Kickstarter, you have to give a date in terms of when you believe this is to be finished. And sure, you can go beyond that a little bit. But if you take it to the piss too much, then obviously you're going to get called out on it, which is obviously what happened here. I would agree that for all the years that he's been there, I think one of the issues that he has, and it comes across a lot in this interview, is that he wants the game to be the best it ever is, but he's willing to sacrifice, to an extent, consumer happiness to get the game that he wants, that he's happy with.
Not the wisest thing to sacrifice if you are looking to make the best game you can. Cause
exactly, yeah.
Customer well-being? Customer goodwill is a finite resource, and if you squander that to the point, then just everyone's going to be like, "Oh, it's that game that's we've been messed around with. I'm not paying it any attention." So what good is it to sacrifice your customer goodwill to make a wonderful game if no one cares about the game?
And they've got such a negative look on it as well. And considering that the game itself incorporates a lot of multiplayer mechanics, that's partly the reason why it hasn't been released, because those mechanics just don't work properly yet. Maybe that sort of stuff would have flown back in what I'd argue to be Molyneux's heyday. Where back in the days where he was releasing stuff like Dungeon Keeper and Populous and Syndicate. Back in what you'd state not the early days of gaming, but certainly the early days of the boom of gaming. We're talking about, as you said, early 90s. Back when we had to install these things on floppy disks. Do you remember those days?
Oh, those were fun days.
Was it Dungeon Keeper 2 came in like a fucking set of floppy disks, and you'd spend there just like putting one in, one out, one out.
Up to 24, it's going good.
Yeah. Oh dear. I wish that I had actually kept some of those floppy disks. Just for, there's nothing else that bloody runs anymore.
I actually want to find a floppy disk, buy it and frame it, and just show it to my children one day and just say, "Child, you will not understand what this is."
Yeah, I know. And
they just look at it and said, "That's the save icon from Microsoft Word, isn't it?" Oh, you poor innocent, you sweet summer child, you have no idea.
Try putting your MP3s on this, it'll blow it up. Damn thing would be able to take
Sony
it.
Walkman.
Yeah. Oh dear. But go back to it. To the initial question of how long is too long, I think, as you say there, it's hard to know in terms of development, especially when you're an indie developer. Things can go on longer. But when you've taken people's money in terms of Kickstarter and you've given a date, if you go too far beyond that, which is obviously what they did, then either your aspirations for what the game should have been are too high and you need to taper that down, or you've got a very inadequate coding team or design team that aren't able to deal with what should be, in your mind, then a very easy game, not an easy game, at least a moderately difficult game to create,
Well, Molyneux does go on to say in here that even though, because he's called out on his experience, so you've had 30 years of bloody experience. I added the bloody there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he goes, well, no, nobody knows how long it will take or how much it will cost, especially for a completely new experience like this. I don't think it's a completely new experience, is it?
Well, even then, even if it was a new experience and he didn't know how much money he did, arguably then he shouldn't have gone on Kickstarter in the first place.
You need to forecast anyway. But on the Kickstarter, he compares himself to Double Fine. I don't think they should be compared to.
Yeah, they don't exactly have a great track record themselves.
You know, it's like, it's just comparing. I don't want to be bad. It's like comparing 50 Shades of Grey with Twilight.
Yeah.
One's a lesser evil, but they're both bad.
Yeah, one doesn't vindicate the other. They're both in a bad situation. Like, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, I would argue one of the big arguments that I have to state with it when going into I don't know how much it would have cost. I would argue that at that point, if you don't know how much it's going to cost, you don't have a fine amount of it, then you shouldn't have taken people's money. You shouldn't have put it on Kickstarter, because then you're putting their money at risk. And he seems too easily available to do that. And he's obviously not the only one here. We're not attacking him. Other people have done this. This isn't the first thing. This is just a recent thing in regards to this, you know.
And to be fair, because a lot of people are giving him stick over this particular game, but Peter Molyneux has got quite the history of promising and failing to deliver, talking up these features that just can't be implemented. I mean, he was talking in Fable as just you would rear up your children, and if you die, your children will take up your mantle. I thought that was bloody exciting. No, nothing like that at all.
Yeah. I wouldn't have an issue with him doing that if he wasn't doing that with other people's money. You know?
But still, why should he get away with it when he was doing the AAA games, Fable 2, Fable 3, etc.? People just looked at him and just say, oh, Peter.
Oh, it's just you again.
Now. When it's just like, dude, why don't we call him on this?
Yeah.
You think he would have learned by now to really just try and let the product speak for itself?
Yeah.
Because that's the best thing. That's the best thing to do. If someone turns up, literally gives you the game, and they just say, "Oh, this is actually fantastic," he just brings up the mic. I know, mic drop, and then walks away.
Yeah,
and everyone would appreciate that. But if he comes up beforehand saying, "Oh, this is fantastic. You're the best multiplayer. This is the iconic of God simulators ever. You will look back at black and white." That's tricky to say when you're trying to speak fast, and you will just cry over it at how awful it is. And then he suddenly wheels it out, and you just have what's there, and people are just like, "Well, what were you talking about earlier?"
Yeah,
because this is not what you were saying. And he's like, "I know, I'm an awful human being."
Yeah,
that's the only thing I will give him stick for in the interview. I hate to cut across, but it's just the fact he gives the most weedy, almost pathetic, self-depreciating statements about himself. It's just like, "I am the worst. I will never talk."
It's easier to say thank you rather than please, isn't it?
I suppose, yeah.
I
just saying, yes, I'm awful. I hate this. I'm just the worst thing to happen to the gaming industry.
Sorry.
Something along those lines, anyway. And it's just like, dude, you don't have to go that far.
There's a big thing about the interview where he's stating, "You're trying to run me out of the business," and the interviewer is stating, "I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to hold you accountable for the things that you said." You know, if it's not so much, and I fully agree with the interview here, it's not him that's trying to run him out of the business. He's basically telling him in very black and white, you need to be held accountable for A, B, and C, and then Molyneux's routine go, "I'm the worst person in the world." That's what I mean. He sounds like someone, to a degree, he's still got a little bit of fight in him, but he sounds like a defeated person in that sense. You know, some of the ways he comes out.
He's trying to bring it right around, so he could engender some sympathy.
Yeah,
that might be harsh to say, but
in this day and age, when you're taking people's money,
it's hard not to make that comparison. When it's just he's screaming about depression, how he's the first into the office and last out of the office. He's working until 2:30 in the morning. He hasn't taken any personal time since 1982, and he's just suffering for it. And he's trying so hard to make this beautiful game that he hopes people will love.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. This is what I truly believe. Making a computer game that's entertaining and that's incredibly credible and that's amazing is almost impossible. It's almost impossible to do.
Yeah, to a point. I reckon at a point in the game's development, if it didn't look like they were far from being completed, and adding all these features. Fine, he's obviously backed himself into a corner, so now he has to, deliver on his promises. But at a point, you've got to realise, okay, maybe we can't make this game as brilliant as we make, but we can still make a good game. We might not be able to make a great game, but we can still make a good game, one that's worthy of the money that people have paid for it. And then when you say there's stuff like Tom Lazy says in here where, he's going on, I'm the first to come in, last to come out. Brilliant, work hard, but by all means, the amount that you work does not discredit you from the results that you create. I could work hard to make a sandwich for 10 hours. If I don't make that sandwich in 10 hours, I'm the one who looks like a fool. Doesn't matter how much time and effort I put into making it.
It could be the tastiest sandwich, but it still took you 10 hours to make the bloody thing.
Yeah, well, the fact is, if you look at it from that perspective, Peter Molyneux took 10 hours to create a sandwich and he still hasn't finished. Because he couldn't finish it. And obviously I know that's looking at it from a different thing. But you know what I mean? Like, someone else could come in, like Revolution, who made, arguably a simpler game, but obviously they made it so they know exactly, we can make this game in this time limit with this amount of money, no problems, right? And they came in, they told exactly what they're going to do, and they did it because they knew it was at their limit. They knew exactly, when they were taking people's money, they knew they could go to the bank with it and say, well, we can make a game with this, no problem, right? And that goes to maybe not so much the developer of Molyneux, but maybe more as the businessman at Molyneux, that he doesn't seem, especially in this interview, to have an issue with taking people's money and not having assurances about when his product will be completed. I think that's very wrong.
That is very wrong.
Yeah. I mean, generally what you do, because even say with applying for a grant from the Arts Council in the UK,
yeah,
they expect you to put down a contingency plan. So that would usually be 5% of your overall expected spending cost. They would say put down 5% of that as fallback contingency. And of course, you do that with time as well. Whatever you expect your time to be, add at least 5% onto that as a buffer.
Yeah. Yeah. As you say there, I think it's down to the fact that one of the things that he says in here as well, as I'm looking through the interview, is that he's the question is asked of him is that you asked for less money on Kickstarter than you knew you were going to need because you didn't want to ask for too much money. Because obviously the thing with Kickstarter is if you don't reach your amount, you don't get anything. All the pledges before that are released back to the public, So maybe he knew that it was going to take, let's just say an example, it would take £1.5 million to create the game, but he knew he wouldn't get that, so he asked for 300,000, knowing there would be more of a chance of getting that, knowing he wouldn't have the rest of the money. And he doesn't seem to have an issue with that because he thinks, oh, well, that'll get us to a point that we can go to all these other places. But when you've promised a game, that's just really dodgy ground, but unfortunately it's a grey area that no one can really enforce. I think that's one of the main issues with it, with the whole Kickstarter thing, is that
it's a hell of a gamble, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, this kind of stuff only happens to a certain point, and then you're going to have, the consumer laws will crunch down on it and state, well, if you make these sort of promises, then you're going to have to deliver at some point.
What happened to Trade Description Act?
That's what I mean.
Here at all?
It's a grey area because technically, at the very laws of it, they're not stating. While they're not stating, this is the main crux of it all. That Peter Molyneux is holding on to with the whole argument here is that it's a grey area. We stated that we think it's going to be completed at this date, but we don't know for sure. There's no way we can know.
What about the features, though? Not so much the time, but the features of it. If he's not delivering on promises that he said it would include.
But his argument then is, but we will include them. They will be included at a later date. But obviously 3 years later, how late is that?
Yes, he loves the word doesn't he, in this interview?
Yeah. But that's the grey area. That's where a lot of these people are getting away because, the Trade Act and the consumer laws, that doesn't cover purchasing a game that technically isn't finished, that you're funding a project. And obviously eventually we'll have to get there, but it isn't at the moment. It doesn't seem like anything's going to be going forward. Not at very least this country. I don't know how things are in the US or stricter countries with a game like Australia and stuff like that. But that's the grey area that he holds on to there, and that's why I asked the first question of what do you guys perceive to be too long? Because I think that's the huge point of it, that when you fund a game, I mean, now it's different because obviously with all this stuff going on, when you fund a game, it has to come with the very public risk of, man, I might not even get a game if I pay this money in. it may be 5 years down the line, and then this developer tells me, I'm sorry, I can't make it. Sorry, I can't give you money back. It's gone.
See, now even anyone who knows their own trade can predict an estimate within a range of how long it would take to complete their thing. So as a writer, I could say that from conception to publication, it would take about 2 years on average.
Yeah, because you've written before, and you...
Well, no, I haven't published anything, but just being within the industry, studying it and everything, I can tell that's... Do you know what I mean? If you have the knowledge, not even the experience, if you have the knowledge, then you'll know within your trade how long it will take.
Yeah, and a lot of his argument goes on that goes along the things I stated, but I think it's invalidated, not so much by what the interviewer said to him. I think it's by the games that are around him. When you look at, as I said, the main one I could talk about because it's the one I was close to is Broken Sword, Kickstarter game, released on time, no problem. And there's tons of other games as well that have gone on the same mold, that they've gone to Kickstarter, taken their money, created the game, everyone's happy, right? What was the other one that was released that I played? Tesla Effect, the Tex Murphy Adventures, the full motion video stuff, right? I talked about it a little bit.
I believe you did, yeah.
I don't remember.
But basically, they're old classic games that were made ages ago. The old developers of it that hadn't made a game for like 13 years or something like that went on Kickstarter, asked for money, knowing that they could give a game with that money at the release date that they stated. They took the money, they made the game, came out, fine. Game wasn't... I liked it because I like those old games, and like people that don't like those games will go into it and think, oh, it's shit. But it was made as a love letter to the people that funded the game. The people that paid the money. Because let's face it, your typical Call of Duty fan doesn't give a shit about Broken Sword, Goddess, or they're not going to be involved. So it's not promoted towards them. I think that a lot of the arguments that Molyneux states here are invalidated by the fact that other companies have successfully done what he says can't be done.
And if you're talking about people going up and beyond the Call of Duty, I'm going to go back to the first game I ever talked about on the Kittens of War podcast, Guns of Icarus.
Yeah.
See, those guys, they suffered, and they sweat blood and tears they gave blood, sweat and tears even to put their product out. They went onto Kickstarter looking to raise about £10,000 to partially fund the developments, which one of the developers actually took a mortgage out of his own house and borrowed money from his own parents to put towards the game, and they still released it on time. Yeah. And even though the studios was closed down during a hurricane when the servers were supposed to open, they ninjaed their way in, kept it going, and kept the game alive.
I mean, the one thing that can be stated that Guns of Icarus is that at very least, when they had their date where they needed to release, they released a game, and what they've added to it, the game that they released on release date was still fully working, fully able to purchase as a full game, worked all as intended, and was fun. I think it's a great game, and I very much doubt anyone that backed it regretted backing that game, right? And obviously, we've all played it here. We all love Guns of Icarus. We think it's brilliant.
Absolutely.
Great fun.
Oh, I want to play Guns of Icarus now.
We'll do so after this chat. Remind us of these.
Green.
Yeah. And you'd even state that at that point, you've got these developers, and I don't know their particular story, I know Tom does, but this was the first game of this ilk, in terms of, I know they made something similar beforehand with the Guns of Icarus tag on it, but with the Guns of Icarus online, with that online tag, making all the netcode, arguably they would be in a much less of a position to know when their game would be finished than someone with Peter Molyneux's track record.
Especially considering they've got the publisher, and that publisher just absolutely creamed them, didn't they?
Yeah.
Just said, no, we're not going for what we're going for. We may just take your design anyway. You just, well,
you brought that up, and that's a brilliant segue into our next question in regards to them signing with a publisher to get their mobile version released.
Even though they originally Molyneux promised not to go near a publisher.
That was the whole thing of him going to Kickstarter, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That I don't want to, that way we can do the game exactly as we like. And yet they've kind of gone back on that promise, which is a big deal as well. One of the interviews that I like with with Charles Cecil, who is the lead of Broken Sword, is that he stated that he worked with a few developers before and found it obviously very creative restricting. We all know that. We know the tales of Dragon Age being pumped out in 14 months and Dragon Age 2, sorry. And
I'd also argue Fable 3, but let's not go there.
Yeah, putting their foot down on developers, making them churn out something before it's ready. So one of the things that he said here, well, at least with this money we can deliver it here, we can have full creative, awesome, right? And that's part of the things about Kickstarter, is that once you do that, then you're free of of publishers. You can go out and create the game exactly as you perceive it to be, without anyone, telling you, well, actually, in this role, instead of having, a weedy guy with glasses, even though that it makes sense in the story of it, we want a chiseled guy that looks like Channing Tatum. He's going to be your lead guy in this game. Make him instead. They don't have to have anything like that, right? They can do things exactly as they like it.
Pros and cons to that, of course.
Yeah, right. Obviously, yeah, I don't want to say that all publishers are evil, but obviously they have to make their money, and that's the bottom line in regard to that.
Yeah. I mean, some of them will have more experience.
The money.
Well, for the inexperienced game developer, then they might be handy because they may have a bit more experience and advice within the industry what would make the game better.
Yeah. I mean,
one
of my other arguments as well that will go into that is that, with this being stated, is that Dean Dodrell, who was the developer of Dust and Elysian Tale, I spoke about it briefly on the podcast.
You did, yes.
About basically one guy who spent 4 years making his game, right? And I don't want us to devolve into an argument about who's working hardest, because I've got no doubt that Peter Molyneux and his team are working hard. Maybe they've taken on a project that's just too far beyond their skill. That's the thing.
Something too ambitious, perhaps.
Yeah, but one of the things with Dust and Elysian Tale is that he was picked up by Microsoft, and they helped him get a lot of the stuff. Not create the game for him by any means, but they definitely gave him. I mean, he's one of the people that stated, one of the few people, and he made a beautiful game, one of the best games I've ever played, on his own, and that's why I've got huge respect for him. But he also stated in that is that Xbox helped him a lot and gave him the platform Microsoft enabled to do that. So it's not as if publishers, even if you hear the evil stories about even the worst publishers, every now and then, you'll come across someone and say, well, actually, I couldn't actually done this without them, in that sense. And it's not so much a... But the thing is that he made a promise that it wouldn't go to a publisher, and it did, for the mobile version. As much as he wants to talk semantics, that puts your reputation in doubt in which it already was.
Yeah.
That you've taken all this money to make some semblance of a game, and then you now have to reach out to a publisher and sacrifice what you stated, that creative input.
He only went to the publisher because he needed the extra money, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
That's the pure and simple reason of it.
That's the black and white,
And
Pardon.
he stated his going on the money side of it, he as you said before, he made his budget plans, and then he got more than what he budgeted for through the Kickstarter, and then still needed double that. So he ended up with £1 million.
Yeah.
Enough for the game.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But one of the, I'm just going through the interview here. One of the things here he's stating, one of the questions is, what happens, I mean, this is back in 2002, what happens if it doesn't get funded? And at that time, Molyneux stated that he wasn't doing the Kickstarter campaign for the money, he was doing it to get people's feedback. If he was asking for people's feedback, and I imagine he's getting a lot of that now, and it ain't positive, as you stated, there's a middle finger right on the front page in regards to them. So... What he's stating here is that this is all semantics, I don't want to talk about it too much, but in terms of the publisher, he's stating that the PC version hasn't gone to a publisher. I'd argue that he's gone to a publisher for a version of his game. That's, it's still going around it, it's still broken as the way it is at the moment. And then he didn't stop Molyneux while all this stuff is going on to go and announce a new game, The Trail, which he's creating very soon, which he's bigged up to everyone as well. In regards to that, saying it's going to be an amazing experience. Yet Goddess is still here, and he's got like his team split up. One group of people making The Trail, another group of people making Goddess. I'd argue if you haven't got a product that's out yet, you don't release plans for a new game until you finish your fucking game.
As soon as I heard that really knocked me. He's got Goddess suffering, and suddenly he's talking about The Trail or whatever the hell this is.
Betrayal.
I don't.
Really?
The Trail, or is
Oh,
that
the trail. I thought you said betrayal, as in to betrayal someone, and I was thinking, how appropriate.
Oh, I see what you did there. No, it's just you don't. If you've got Kickstarter, you're focusing on bringing out this game, which is taking far too long to make. Now you start talking about making another game. That's just no. That's just not cool.
He must have realised, even in the state of mind that he was, that you couldn't have come up with a new idea for a game while this was still hanging over your head. You tidy your bed first before you go and sleep in it again. That's quite a good line, actually. But I'm looking at it here, and in terms of the interview, and I'll quote here. So why say it's going to take you 7 months to make it when you know it's not? And the reply was, one thing, Goddess will be one of the fastest games I've ever done. If you go back and look at every single game I've ever worked on, other than Fable 3, they've all taken longer, with the exception, perhaps, of the original Populous. They've all taken longer. Does it sound like with that, to be a man stuck in the early 1990s of game development that maybe hasn't caught up in the times of 2010 onwards, that he honestly thinks that in this day and age with improved technology, because let's face it, back then games did take longer to make because technology wasn't up to scratch, in terms of making a game and all the different, now you've got engines that create this stuff for you, things have moved up. Game development now, just in general, is quicker, I will state that. Do you think that maybe he is stuck? They're thinking with the time frame, well, actually, if I take 4 or 5 years to make a game, that's pretty good time. Which, obviously that isn't the case nowadays. Do you think in that case he is stuck back there?
I think he is, but that's not really. That's not a good counter argument, isn't it? It's just like you're taking too long. Well, look at all the games I've made; they've taken forever. It's like they've taken a long time as well.
Yeah.
Like, what's your point? Yeah. That you can't make games on time?
Yeah.
How is this an argument?
Yeah. I tell you what, for a guy that curses, it sounds like to me, for all this, that maybe, arguably, and this is the most ironic thing I think with all of this, for all the stuff for him not having publishers to work with him, I think actually having a publisher to work with Peter Molyneux is probably the best thing for him, because that way he's got his cash source coming in, he has a deadline, and he's got someone willing to put the foot on his neck and state, well, you can't take 5 years making this because we ain't going to fund you for that long. You won't have a game at the end of it. And it's kind of looking back at it now, maybe he does need one of these, one of the only people in the world that actually needs one of these, pricks from EA to really just go, okay, well, no, you can't do that. You have to do it this way. Or would you state that would be damaging to the game as a whole? Or
it's a double-bladed sword, though, isn't it? On one hand, it will damage the product, but on the other hand, so will not getting the product out.
Yeah, you can argue that, yeah. Oh dear.
It's just a tricky position for him to be in, and I would have just hoped that he would learn from his past mistakes, because if he does take a long time making the games, then he should at least be able to, this goes back to what we said earlier, be able to predict better. Because he's been here before. He knows exactly the situation he's been in.
Yeah.
He admits as well, these games, he asks the interviewer, which games did you like? And the interviewer goes, Populous, Dungeon Keeper, Syndicate. And then Peter goes, right, they were all late. He says it himself, and the interviewer then says, I'm not complaining.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like,
he's kind of doing the job for the interviewer almost.
Yeah, a little bit. Like, one of the main things the interview states here is that he doesn't have to word it in a way that try and gets his point across, because Peter Molyneux essentially does that himself. I think it's an issue there that, while obviously we don't know, we've never been in development of a game, we don't know in regards to it, games do come late, we know that. But like I said, that's why it goes back to the first question. I mean, how late is late? There comes a point where late is just stupid. It just gets... Late is just not... It's not ever going to arrive. It's not going to happen. It's not going to be feasible for this game to be released at any sort of time frame. And, that is beyond late to me. I mean, late is 5 minutes, 5 minutes to a party late, not... I'm not going to arrive to it at all. That's the word there. One of the things here is that he states as well. One of the other things that he states here, and this kind of is interesting to talk about because he states that there's been a lot of updates in regards to the game, Goddess. There's been tons of updates done to it. They've done loads of community videos. They've responded to over 31,000 posts and tickets about the game. Do you think that makes any dent in regards to how the game's been? The fact that he's at very least tried to be communicate with the people that bought it at very least. Do you think that is a saving grace of something at least for the guy? Or?
I will say that's at least something because I've read a few. I do browse through my queues a lot for Steam, and I've seen a lot of people just say the developers have essentially become dust in the winds, and the game's unfinished, and there's no sign it will be finished anytime soon. What the hell's going on? At least with Peter, he's trying to keep up with it. He's failing, but he's trying. Yeah,
he's trying to hold back the tide, but he's unable to do so.
But at least the fact he's there on the I'm going nautical metaphors right now on the prow of his ship, trying to steer it out of this maelstrom of Sorry, I was trying to be poetic there. This maelstrom of terribleness.
Yeah, if he steered the ship to its demise, then at very least he's going to stay on it and be there and sink with it. At least he's
still there, trying to steer it back out, as opposed to some people who's just like, "Where's the captain gone? He's nowhere to be seen. He's fucked off in the life raft when the weather was just getting choppy."
Yeah, and there are people like that as well. So you have to give the guy some credit in regards to that. He's tenacious at very least, and I get the point here. I firmly believe him when he says that. I believe everything that he says. He believes will happen, and that's part of the reason why I did say earlier on that maybe he does need.
He believes.
Yeah. But that's why I said that maybe he does need a publisher. That when he comes out with this sort of stuff, and you have to say, well, actually, considering your track record, state also. That might not be the case, you have to give, it's kind of borderline false advertisement, some of the stuff he comes out with, and that's something he can get pulled on legally.
Yeah, Jim Sterling, he actually mentioned this because he covered this on a YouTube release on Monday today, in fact.
Yeah,
and he did say that the kind of promises and failing to deliver is tricky enough when he's doing a AAA published game, but when you're doing it on your own merits to a Kickstarter, a crowd-funded game, that kind of what he does could very much destroy him and the game he's working on, because they're not interested in excuses. They put money for a product that they were told to expect, not a game that's just being advertised.
Yeah, and one part of things with him saying that he was going to get the game finished within the initial 7 months is what he's stating here, is that he states that he firmly thought that he'd be able to get it done in 7 months, but there was always a part of him that thought that it might not be done, and whether or not he communicated that well enough, I think that's down to each and every single person that backed the game. That's down to whoever looks at it. We can't answer that for each and every single person. They take that risk when they purchase a copy of when they back the game. So one of the things to sell in regards to the publisher thing, he states here that he's focusing on the mobile that he wasn't going to go and focus on the mobile version until the PC version was finished, and obviously he went back and said that. He tries to go back and said, I wish I hadn't focused on that. There's a lot of stuff that eventually he admits that he did talk about it too much, and he firmly believed that this would be done, and then it just didn't get to the point. There could be an argument that stated that over 20 years of him doing this, that maybe he should have already learnt to curb it back, and maybe he's been protected by the publishers that he's been working with. And this is the first time that he's had to. This is the first time he's had to do it on his own, and now it's on. Well, I don't have a corporate suit. And like I said, this is all speculation, so don't take this out of frame. Of course, we don't know, but maybe this is the first time he doesn't have a corporate suit to block all that stuff, and now he has to deal with it himself. He's like, whoa, what the fuck's going on here? Like, I can't say what I want to say anymore, because it's essentially false advertisement. In regards to that, let's go on and talk about another point of the. I know we've gone in generalization. in regards to that. So they did a thing here, and I don't know the full thing of this. I hope one of you guys did look it up. But the interview relates a lot to Brian Henderson. Did you look up on this? It was a big talking point.
I didn't actually. I did think I should need to look that up, but then I realised it was 2:00 in the morning, and I had to go to sleep for university in the morning.
Yeah, of course. As far as I can deduce, that he was supposed to be like a large part of the game. Apparently, they have a thing where he would be like the god of gods or something like that, and then people would be able to overthrow him after a certain amount of time. I think he won a competition, something along those lines. But
something like that. That's all I know.
Yeah, I think he was promised either he would be paid by them to do something, and obviously with the game not being released, he's been essentially fucked for that. He doesn't have any of it.
I think it was just what was that thing about? Said that the time he'll be God of Gods will be 5 to 10 years or something.
Yeah, it was. As I said, it's more stuff coming out of Molyneux's mouth. He's initially said, it would be at very least 6 years, but it could go on for this long, depending on how the game goes on. And obviously it didn't go to that point because the game hasn't even been released yet.
And then he turned around and said it would actually happen for about 6 months.
Yeah.
Gods.
Backtracked, yeah. Now, the issue is that with all this, with him expecting to be done, apparently Molyneux did not talk to Brian Henderson for nearly 2 years. And obviously this guy who was waiting for what he perceived to be a job, or along those lines, to be working with the game, to be acting as this role, I once said before that what I perceive it to be, and like I said, I could be wrong, I once said how cool it would be if maybe the guys at Blizzard or ArenaNet who make their MMOs, Guild Wars 2, World of Warcraft, that if they were to pay people to act as as their main characters, and they could go and quest with other people, and they would talk all in character and stuff like that, and they would pay people 8 hours a day to go do that. I imagine it would be roughly the same thing that this guy was going to be doing.
I've just read the article, and he basically won a prize on the game and received an email with a link where Molyneux was expressing that the kid I say kid because he was 18, had won the game, and he would be turned into a digital god.
And that was Cube, wasn't it?
Sorry?
That was the game in question. I think that was Cube or Curiosity or something like that.
No, this is for Goddess.
Yes.
I'm sure it's for
apparently if you get to the centre of the cube in Curiosity, you win a prize.
Oh, yeah, you are right. Yeah.
Curiosity.
Yeah.
Cube. Yeah. Curiosity, yeah. So they said that because he won that, Molyneux told him that he would become a digital god and would receive a cut of the money made by Goddess from the start of your reign to its end.
Yeah, so essentially there was money kind of promised to him in that sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that was just silly, wasn't it?
Yeah. Now...
nothing.
A big... Yeah, go on, sorry.
18 months later, he's 21 and he's yet to hear anything more from them.
Yeah, they not even that. When he tried to get in contact with them, he couldn't. There was no way he could because Peter Molyneux was not talking to him, which is really, really bad. And now he's apologised. But part of the big talking point here is that it took an article from Eurogamer to chase after him that he would actually bring this to light and say, I apologise and everything for this. And then there's a big question here is, you only talk about this now because Eurogamer chased after it. And he's like, they only made me realise that I hadn't checked up on it. And this is where he does the sort of thing that Tom was saying. I'm a very flawed human being. I totally accept that I'm flawed. I'm the worst person in the world. All this sort of stuff. And it's like...
He did a whole video for the prize, though. If the kid won... then he received the video. So Molyneux knowingly did the video. I mean, can you be so forgetful that you forget actually doing a video?
Yeah.
The article stated, the god who Peter Molyneux forgot.
Wow, that's pretty powerful title.
That is a hell of a statement, considering Peter Molyneux did essentially create the god game genre, didn't he?
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah.
Gods were populous, and then solidified it with Black and White and Dungeon Keeper and all that.
Yeah. As you say there.
I am reeling from that. Wow. You forgot.
That's a good title right there.
That is a good title.
But here goes into more of the stuff that he's saying here. This is one of the things I said before, and it kind of solidifies that. He seems like a guy who he's bitten off more he can chew and has all these things to keep track of, and he's just not capable enough to be able to do it. He says here, and this is by quote, "And when there are thousands of things to check on, you try to rely on your team, and they slip through the net, and you're right, it shouldn't have done." If I was a team, I'd be a bit pissed off with that statement, personally. But
I would be.
So yeah, the whole God of Gods things, and he's stating that there will be no money paid to Brian Henderson until he plays the role of God of Gods, but as we know, we have no clue when this will be released. So ideally, that money won't be going to him. And I think right at the very end of the interview, he states, well, wouldn't it be good of you to at least get some money set up for this guy who was promised this cash? And Peter Molyneux doesn't ever say he's going to. He's like, oh, we'll look into doing that, which is no, in my opinion.
I can't do it now. I've got things to do. For
a guy that apparently is so strapped for cash to finish the project he started 3 years ago, I very much doubt he's going to let that money go. That's personally.
Especially not that essentially he's running out of money and relying on publishers to actually get the game sorted.
Yeah.
I think you could have saved a bit of dosh with actually not doing that whole press release, that whole gimmick and the video.
That's the thing. He's very creative and he's passionate. And he loves these ideas and he wants to run with them, but he just can't with a lot of them, can he?
It's like raw passion for what he does and excitement. It's incredible to see that, but
it's
kind
a
of got to have
it needs to be curbed to deliver, because when you can make a promise and deliver, then everyone will throw up their hands in the air and lose their nonsense, won't they?
Like as a head of a company, he has a responsibility to his consumers, and he's played with that way too much. One of the bits here is that after talking about that whole God of Gods thing, is that's when he starts hitting back at the interview, and he's stating, he starts quoting the interviewer, starts quoting a lot of the stuff that he said in previous interviews, and then Peter Molyneux gets very like, oh, I can see you're trying to get me out of this industry. Well done. If this is what you wanted, then you're going about it completely the right way. And one of the best lines, I think, of this entire interview is exactly after that, and I'll quote here: "If you were to be driven out of the industry, it would be a result of your own actions. I've done nothing but quote things back things you've said and done." And that's essentially the majority of what the interviewer does.
Yeah.
In this entire interview. I'm sure people... I must get frustrating for a guy who does a lot of interviews, maybe doesn't curb his words or anything along those lines, as we've already established, to have all these things quoted at him, and he's thinking, oh, why did I say that? But he got too excited, as you said there, Hayley. He's too excited about his games, he's passionate.
Yeah.
But
if I didn't know that he had 30 years of experience, I would say he's likened to a student where he's just got so much energy and excitement, but then he's kind of sulking and having a kind of a strop. He's having a bit of a strop with the way that he words his responses in his interview.
Yeah.
Look, he said, like with the, okay, fine, I'm going to get out of the industry, fine, if you want it. And he says that, and my answer, he talking about the bit going in the press. He was asked about the way he hypes everything up. He says, I want to be like a PR person is. And my answer is to that is, okay, John, fine. I won't talk about my development process. I won't talk about my games. That's what I'm going to do. There you go. You've got what you wanted. I don't think the interviewer said that he wanted that.
No, but arguably, and man, this is going to be controversial, arguably, if he did keep his mouth shut, he wouldn't be as big of a problem as he was now.
No. Well,
sure, that's not quite a controversial statement. A lot of people have said that.
But considering what we said earlier, the fact that we have to commend him for keep talking to his fans, I think there's a difference between talking to his fans and doing updates in the game and doing press releases and going to outlets and stuff like that. And maybe him doing a press hiatus for a while, and maybe for the benefit at very least for this guy's mental health, because he seems to be in a real bad state. I don't want anyone. It doesn't matter what they've done to be in the state that he's in, because he does.
He does need to be hounded. And you don't need to feel like you're being persecuted.
So maybe, step away from the press, but keep social media going, because he's already got his fan base. He already has his reputation. Say social media.
At least keep the crowd, the people who crowdfunded your game updated. Talk to them.
Yeah,
blogs,
give them statements,
reports, updates, and social media, but keep away from the press and interviews, because he does seem to get too hyped on his own passion. It's like he gets drugged on his own passion.
Yeah, And he makes extremely outlandish statements.
It's a shame because he's got wonderful ideas for games, and he does speak it when he talks about some ideas. They're just like, oh, this would be amazing if this were true. But God damn it, Peter.
He either doesn't have the ability as a games developer to be able to pull those things off, or he doesn't have the business sense to hire the people that have the ability to do so. That's the bottom line. I mean, he's made a lot of promises that he thinks will be true, but maybe he's deluding himself with these statements, thinking, well, I trust in my team that we can do this. But realistically, when you look at the cold hard facts of it, look at the bottom dollar, regardless of what you believe, what you emotionally believe, with all the math done up, do you think this could be possible? I don't think he can distinguish the two. Like, to him, if he wants to believe in his team, and that is the bottom line. There is no, okay, I want to believe in you guys, and I do believe in you guys, but realistically, can we do this? I don't think there is that realistically. He's just like, I believe you can do it, let's do it.
He's a dreamer. Well, this is maybe he does need to hire like a management advisor, to advise him. Okay, no, not like a minder, but an advisor to say, well,
someone to talk back the reins a bit and just go, Peter, we need to calm down a bit, mate.
Yeah. He's a creative dreamer. You kind of need something to balance that counterweight.
Something
so
to
maybe
ground
he needs to look at expanding his team to include someone with a level head.
Yeah. But maybe though he
needs a yang to his yin, for want of a better term. He needs someone to ground him, to stop him from floating up into the air and just talk.
Yeah.
Here's the question though: is he going to see that person exactly what the publishers have done to him before, and just be, I can't deal with you. I need to get rid of you because you're stopping my creative flow. And he's just like, well, if I want to do it, I'll do it. And because he's still technically the owner of his company.
Yeah.
Like, will he accept someone in that role? That's the real question.
Oh, he needs to. He really needs that. But the problem is, he's not going to listen to this podcast, is he?
No.
We might do.
Too busy.
One day. That day when we have swarmed by many a fans.
Come to listen to our greatness.
The masses. That's what we say.
Yes, the masses. When the masses have amassed around us.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he definitely needs someone level-headed, and he's going to have maybe a strop, for want of a better word, and refuse to listen to the advisor. But he is an advisor at the end of the day, and I think lessons are learned often the hard way.
Ideally, what he needs to do, to get everything back on track, finish this game, which obviously is a huge task, and I know it's not as easy as just saying finish this game, but finish this game, clear up any projects he's got in the past, and taking all the emotion out of it, look in the mirror and say, if I'm going to make another project, because my reputation is shot, he admits it here, he states he thinks his reputation is shot, and it is, realistically. His reputation is shot. How am I going to make a game in the future that I want to make, but it's still feasible to create and doesn't piss off my fan base? And that's a really hard thing to do. It's not as easy as that, but it looks like the guy goes from one game to another game to another game without taking a breather and actually going, okay, where are we going forward as a company? Not even as a game developers, but as a company. Where are we going from here?
So if you're looking back at the way he talks about his products, I mean, he hypes the next game, but bashes the last one.
He definitely needs.
He puts me in mind of that stereotypical French artist, the one who's been up until 4 a.m. painting, and then wakes up at 1 in the afternoon, looks at all his paintings and starts slashing them all, saying, "No, these are awful. What on earth was I thinking?"
Yeah,
he kind of reminds me of myself, actually.
Sorry?
He kind of reminds me of myself, actually.
Well, you are a writer, Bubs, and you're a creative.
I am a dreamer. I dream and
the creative types hate their own creations. I think that's the beautiful irony of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move forward. Let's talk about the a little bit more in depth about the pledge rewards. Now, I imagine
what, sorry?
The pledge rewards.
That's
what I spoke about before. The stuff like the books and stuff. That if you
$50,
$100 that you owed.
Gotcha.
Essentially, here the big question is, right? 3 years have passed. They've paid lots of money to get these pledge rewards. They would have paid, way more than the game is to get this extra stuff to support, 22 Cans and Peter Molyneux, right? To get this game released. And they offered these pledge rewards. It's nothing new. Kickstarter does all of them. Even the successful ones have, right? And they've sent theirs out, and sometimes there've been issues, but the only ones that I know of, they've all been sent out, right? And it's all been fine. But obviously here they haven't. And part of the issue is that he states, well, you can't make a making of book of the game until the game is finished, so he's not sending out any of the pledge rewards until the game is finished. But he does state that Kickstarter's terms and conditions are explicit that you have to provide the pledge rewards. And that's the grey area that he's hanging on to there. But I can't make it because technically the game isn't finished.
Yeah.
That, to me, I think he can get hung on because that wasn't referenced. I think when it actually comes to the pledge rewards, I think he's in a lot more hot water with that than he is actually with the game, arguably.
I'm inclined to agree.
Like, that goes back to the very first question. How long is too long? I think too long for the pledge rewards, considering he already states that, we've got a game out. It may be a little bit broken, but it's out. You can still get it. Why can't he release the making of book of what's already been done? And I think that with a person that's mucked around his consumers in this fashion, wouldn't you say, okay, you know what? We haven't done the game yet. You guys have purchased these things. You know what? We'll release half of the making of book of what we've done so far. Give that out to you guys. And one of the things is like, maybe I shouldn't put my time into the making of book because I'll be putting it into the game. I would state that because of the money that's been put into it, you at least got to give these people something.
Or at least stop focusing on the next bloody game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the biggest thing of it, isn't it?
So the reporter says here, do you not see the difference between being late for a publisher and being late for £500,000 that gamers gave you? So being late for all those people and not delivering their
hard-earned money.
Yeah, their money that they don't actually have that sort of money just to throw into a game, but they specifically gave you that money, those faces behind those checks.
It's not just the faceless company giving money. It's the people who are going to buy your game afterwards, or for actually buying your game now. They're giving you money and saying, we believe in you.
Well, he says he doesn't do it for the money. He says he does this for the fans, for the feedback. Well, your fan base are wanting their products that you promised. Yeah. Basically, the pledge rewards.
I think at very least what you can do, and he won't do it because, as I said, financially he's in trouble. Is that he should at least refund the money. If you can't give people these pledge rewards, then he should refund the money back down to the tier that at very least gives them a copy of the game. So if the copy of the game, let's say, was £15, but they've spent £50, then he needs to refund the £35. There's no way of getting around it. If he doesn't think it's going to be completed, then that's the only way. He's not going to. And it continues on stating, don't you think they deserve their money back? And Peter Molyneux says, no, they only deserve an explanation as to why they haven't got them yet. And maybe they would deserve their money back if we announced we weren't doing something, but we haven't announced that. How long is it going to take to get those stuff done at that point? Yeah. How long is too long? That's the big question.
Yeah, how long? I mean, he specifically says as well that he doesn't have the money personally to plough into his own company to refund anyone or to do anything really.
Neither did Muse, but they still pulled it off.
Yeah. I know, and even then, if he didn't have that safety net, then he shouldn't have asked for people's money to begin with. If he honestly wasn't that sure that the money was going to be enough to create some semblance of a game. And people might argue, well, it's still not access. It is still some semblance of the game. The game barely works with what I've seen of it. I knew when it was first released onto early access, it didn't work. People were telling me it's literally nothing. The thing just doesn't work. It's just nothing. So that's the bottom line of it here. And part of the reason he says that, and this is where he starts getting a bit emotional, you can tell by the transcript, he replies, well, because we're so fucking busy trying to make this game a great game. And that's the big argument. Should you sacrifice, with all the consistencies, trying to make a great game into a good game? At least you give the fans, your backers, not even your fans at this point, something, at very least, because this project has gone on too long. Obviously, you can't do what you think you can do in the time not allowed. Finish it, get something at what you think is good, and then go on to something else. Do you think these guys deserve? What's your camp? Do you think that if you were in Peter Molyneux's position, would you say, okay, we need to stick by our guns, we need to make this game great, so we've given everything what we promised, or do we just sacrifice things to get this done, get this whole miserable mess behind us, and at least deliver something to these people? What would you do?
That's
a tough question.
It's a really tough question. In my mind, I would rather deliver what I was promised and take it a little bit longer, but just keep people well updated and just hash something out now that people are demanding now that's not with the features they were expecting, because then they'll turn around and say, oh, you're giving us now, but it's not what we wanted.
Yeah.
They definitely need to be informed and kept updated, because it's like 50 quid out of your pocket. The average Joe, who's obviously passionate about the work and passionate about his work and his games enough to want to buy the making of book. Maybe that's a student who's wanting to do their course and they need it. They're planning to use it in their third year, and oh no, they've already graduated and don't have got a job. Still haven't got the book. They definitely need to be informed, because if these people are willing to pay 50 quid for this stuff, and they obviously want it, so they will probably still want it in theory. So they've got to hurry up and deliver, but keep the fans informed, because it's if they don't, then it's like stealing.
Yeah, I mean, even if their fans are being very aggressive towards them, they need to keep updating them still. I mean, when I say aggressive, there's a difference between aggressive in terms of I'm really disappointed the game has been released now, I feel like I'm being treated badly. That's okay when you've got people like sending stuff like, I'm going to kill you because your game's not released. That's wrong, obviously.
That's just not cool.
Yeah. I don't know if that's happened. I don't know if that's happened here. I don't even think it has, but just stating in general, because some
people are like that.
Yeah.
Given what we've seen some of the gaming community be like, I would not honestly be surprised if Peter has got a modest collection of death threats.
Yeah. To the masses, come on, people, keep it classy.
Let's just not be those people, yeah?
Yeah, that's it.
We're not those guys.
So we're wrapping up the interview here. There's a few more talking points, obviously, but we've gone through a lot of the stuff in regards to it there. And then there's a lot of talk about all the games that he's done before and things that have run on later, as we brought up earlier on. And then I think Peter Molyneux here, as you said there earlier on, Tom, he does get very defensive, very emotional, I think. I think one of the words are, oh, let's carry on, let's make me more depressed. And that I never thought for a moment that the interviewer came in with the intention of trying to pile the world on Peter Molyneux. He was just stating what has happened and trying to get factual responses.
He was just sick of his nonsense, because Peter Molyneux, he does have the reputation. We've been saying it time and time again. This is what you say, Peter Molyneux. People think, oh, he promises the world but can't deliver.
Yeah. Or I think one of the famous lines of Fable is, I'm going to make the greatest combat in any game by only using one button. That didn't really work out. But
how does that even happen?
I don't know.
You can't just use one button.
You say that, but people have got through Fable 1, 2, and 3 by spawning the magic button.
Yeah, that's it. His infamous one-button combat.
Well, just hit something, twat it.
Area spell, skadoosh.
Yeah.
Twat it with a stick. I mean, that's just so basic, though. That is very 90s, early thousands.
It is a bit, isn't it?
Twat it with a stick. It's a bit of a platform almost.
It's not so much that, but it's just the fact you can breeze through combat just by using your surface area magic spell and just killing everything very quickly.
The thing is, right, is that if he had said, oh, we're making a very simplistic but yet rewarding combat system, the way he worded that would have made it seem a little bit more approachable. The fact that he came out with that and said, I'm making the best combat in any RPG and I'm only going to use one button. It's like, okay.
So hold on, we're making a list of staff members he needs to hire, as well as an advisor, management advisor. He also needs to hire a ghostwriter for his speeches.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, I'd agree with
that. To manage what he says and promises.
He needs essentially one person to do all those roles, and I know it'd be very hard to do it because you're essentially dealing with a guy. Like I said, that's part of the question here. Yeah, you might get someone to do that. I firmly believe, just by the interview, that he wouldn't want anyone in that role. He wouldn't want anyone overseeing him because, for one reason or another, he's been burnt by publishers, and he wants to take as much time as he wants to make what he perceives to be a great game. And the problem is, when you take consumers' money to do that, you're on borrowed time, and it's their time that you're borrowing.
Yeah.
Over a certain point.
Do you know, I think he kind of needs a partner who he trusts but who will also be harsh.
Yeah. Ideally, he needs to co-own a company with someone else.
Yeah.
He needs someone firm and fair with him.
Yeah, exactly. You need a Russian. You need a Russian to be alongside of him. Harsh, but fair. A good Russian developer to go alongside of him,
Brilliant.
That's what we need. Harsh, but always fair. So he wraps on the interview, and like I said, we have skipped some stuff, but we're just talking about a thing in generalizations. He still ends it with stating, "I'm gonna keep doing Goddess. I'm still gonna keep going. I'm passionate about the industry." And he states, "Oh, I'm not going to be doing more interviews afterwards." And after this interview was done, he did do other interviews. So maybe it's just because they were previously booked. I'm not going to go into that too much yet, but. Do we think that's the last time that Peter Molyneux have his foot in his mouth? No, it's Peter Molyneux, right?
No.
He will do it again. Let's hope that he doesn't do it this time with consumers' money on the line. You know, that's the. I didn't mind him running his mouth before. In fact, it was kind of funny, but
it was endearing originally, wasn't it? It's
yeah.
just like, oh, Peter.
Yeah, but when he's doing crowdfunding and doing it this way, and he's not doing it off the publisher's dime. Then it gets personal, because nowadays more than ever people are very protective of money. You have to be, right?
Post 2009 recession, yeah.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It's not so much that; it's just because we've had a lot of people abusing the early access system.
Yeah,
people can get quite worked up by it, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this sounds like our government, doesn't it? Making false promises and never delivering.
Well, that's like a majority of governments there, to be honest. Yeah, that's what I mean. This isn't so much a conversation in regards to the interview. I think the interview is good because it brings up a lot of issues that are around this. You know, I think the early access on Steam is a fucking joke. I really do. DayZ? I was interested in buying DayZ, and then I hear of people. It hasn't been updated in God knows how long. Half the features, and the game has been out for ages. It's the standalone DayZ. Hasn't been released. They did an update, and it added like nothing into the game, but it bumped up the price of the game in early access. It's like, what the fuck's going on with this? And like, you know, the servers aren't working too well, and all these lines. So it's still in early access. I think Steam needs to put, I think at very most, tops. As soon as you go on early access, you got 2 years. If you've not finished your game by then, we're taking your game off.
That's a fair request. That really is.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
2 years. I think 2 years. Yeah, you can argue all the day. Well, some games may take longer. With that case, make sure you've got a much more stable alpha or beta build before you put it on early access.
Exactly, yeah, because that's 2 years on top of the alpha that you publish.
Yeah,
but it's also the fact that spent. Sorry, go on, Haley.
I was just saying, you would have already spent like 1 or 2 years or 18 months on this game before you publish it as an alpha or beta. So another 2 years is more than reasonable.
I think 2 years is. I think 2 years as a max. I think is fine.
I disagree with that myself. But
okay, go on. How would you do it?
I'd say it would depend on the scale of the game you're looking at, because you do see some games that are really small. Sorry, excuse me. Are really small that could be churned out easily in 2 years, but just take forever to do. But some ones that are just much more bigger and much more ambitious that need a little bit more time than 2 years.
But do they go on early access? Those big ambitious ones, do they go on early access, or because they're so big, do the developers find a publisher?
It's a double-bladed. Let's say the good side of early access is because, as I say, it can actually really fund a game on Steam. Because, well, as I say, it can really fund the game, and it could also really it acts as its own marketing sometimes. Because some people play a good early access game, they spread it around. YouTube does it, and then suddenly everyone wants a piece of that game.
Minecraft is the ultimate example of that. Like, Minecraft and YouTube was a match made in heaven, and literally the game fucking exploded because of it. I know it wasn't early access, but I know it wasn't Steam early access, but it was the first game like this to come out that wasn't completed, but yet fans just went straight for it. I purchased it in beta, Minecraft, but like, one thing I'd say in argument to you, Tom, there is that. Yeah, okay, so if you want to make let's say you want to make an MMO, right? You want to make a massive MMO, as big as scale as, say, Guild Wars or World of Warcraft when they were first released. I would argue that if you're going to make a game that's that big, then it's such a huge undertaking that you shouldn't be using early access anyway. I know what you're going to say here. Let me try and explain a little bit better.
Go ahead.
Obviously, there's risks with doing crowdfunding, and if one thing we could take out of the Peter Molyneux interview is that, things can take longer. Things might go on longer, and you may not have a finished product for God knows how long. with that increased risk of, let's say, making an MMO or a big, huge, open, expansive game, with that coupled on top of it, if when you're putting it out there, then you're taking a bigger risk than the games that are lower than it. So should you really be using the early access at all? You may not be able to get that game funded, but is it just too much of a risk on the developer's end to state that, well, our team might not maybe burn out this project in 7 years, that we want to do it?
Well, let's say if you're going on that, then I will actually go into your side here. There is another counter argument. The people that you're relying on, the ones that gave you the money to begin with, they lose interest because the game's not completed and they've already played it. So
that's a huge point. Yeah, exactly. Like one of the things.
Then it loses its steam, and then the developers lose steam because the sales are plummeting, and then they can't finish the game.
And then it's just a big mess like this.
Especially if you release the game at a lower price when it first comes out. Whereas if it's such a big game, say like Guild Wars, then you're more likely to want to sell it at full price, aren't you?
Yeah, to that degree.
Let's say some early access games do that. They say we're selling it at this price now, and they do advertise the prices that they're planning to sell it. Say, alpha game is at £4. Early access game £6-7, and then the full release game £10-15, whatever.
Yeah,
they advertise that fact. They say this is the price you're paying for now. If you want to get in and help us, you pay a little less price. But since it's done, this is the price we aim to sell it at because we got a week too.
Yeah,
that's fine. Well, I mean that's like for a small game, for a price like that, that's a small game.
Like you suddenly just bump up the price, then people are going to get unhappy. But if you tell people beforehand what you plan to do, then they're going to be like, okay, we know now.
But here's the thing, though. I mean,
anyway,
one of the things that DayZ did is that they planned out all the stuff they were going to do. They just didn't do them. Half the features they said there would be in the game at this point aren't in the game. And that's a huge risk.
So they did a Molyneux.
To an extent, yeah. And in part,
oh my gosh.
I think that because DayZ is I think it's a much more popular game than obviously Goddess is. That's just outright. But it brings into the fact that here's a big argument, here's a big talking point about this. Let's say you bring out a game in early access. This is pretty much what happened with DayZ, and it's a big talking point I know Total Biscuits talked about. They get all these influx of people because it's getting shared on YouTube. Everyone loves the original DayZ, so they get tons of cash. People throwing in on their early access, right? And they've made more than they ever thought they would. Do you think at that point, because it's such a grey area, that they would think, well, we've got all this money, we don't need to make the rest of the game? Realistically, we've got the money, we made no assurances that we were going to finish the game, we've got a working build-up, let's just do it whenever we like, on our own merit, because we've made our money. Now, obviously that's very for developers. We're basically insinuating that some developers are utter cunts in that sense.
We're not going to name names here.
Yeah, but I'm not naive enough to believe that there's no one out there that's not like that. They wouldn't say, oh, wow, we got a lot of money from this. Well, let's start working on our next game. You know what I mean? There's no reason to keep working on this one.
People actually making broken games and making money off broken games. Like, what was it? Airplane Simulator? Airport Simulator?
Oh, God.
What was it called? It wasn't quite that one.
I know exactly the one you're talking about. Oh my goodness!
Oh, the name's escaping me right now. Hang on, I've really got to look that up.
It's literally, if you look for rankings of games, it's the bottom one on Steam. Like out of all the games they've ever done, that's the worst rated game.
They've removed it from Steam.
Oh yeah, they didn't they?
When did they do that? I checked it recently.
Battles or something like that, Tom.
Sorry, it's what called? It's what?
Airline Battles or something. Because it's. I remember it's got something to do with the airline itself. Airline Wars, I think. I
don't know. I checked on it on there quite recently. If you just look at like ratings of games and look at the bottom one, that's where I saw it. I was like, oh my goodness, it looks shocking.
First game.
Okay, Simulator. What was it called?
I don't know. I can't check because I'm recording.
Oh goodness, it's going to bug me. But yeah, people making money off the broken games.
Yeah,
that's just. I see some people would argue Goat Simulator, but I think Air Control, that's the one.
Yeah. Well, with Goat Simulator, I'd argue that game sets out what it chooses to do. Right? It gives you what it has on the tin. It's not an early access game.
It does. It turned around and said this game is broken.
Yeah,
we're not looking. We're going to fix all the bugs that crashed the game, but everything else, we just want it to be an absolute riot.
Yeah, it was meant. It was built with that intention, not to break the game in terms of mechanics, but I mean the game works. It's meant to have all this weird physics shit happening and have all these references. I've got no issue with that. It's good. That sells exactly what is on the tin. And I'd argue that if anyone, let's say let's say this happens, it's totally extreme. Someone releases a game, says this is broken, and in the thing it says this is a broken game, it doesn't work. Here's £15. If you bought it then as a consumer, that's your own fucking problem. Like, they didn't say it's early access. They said it was a broken game, and that will never happen. But some people do often do this, and I think it's some of the risk that when you go out and purchase an early access game that you really want to do. I think less and less people are doing it now, because of the amount of times people have been burned by early access games, and pre-ordering and stuff like that,
I have to admit, every time I see early access, I do feel a hesitation if I do look to buy it. I see early access and I'm just like, do I really want this one?
Yeah. And it has to be reviewed as the game it is, not the game it's going to be, because you don't know if it ever will become the game it's going to be. With all those features. Oh, this game, it's really good because they're going to add all this stuff. No. You don't
tell me how good it will be. Tell me how good it is now.
Yeah. How does it work right now? Is it good now? If it's good now, then fair enough. And then any updates that they do is something added on to that. But if it's like, they've had this game. I can definitely tell what it's going to be, and when it gets there, it's going to be great. Now, I don't want to hear that anymore when I hear reviews of early access stuff. It has to be what the game exactly is on that day, because that's essentially what you're buying. Because you've got no guarantee they'll ever go back to it again. No guarantee. And now we've come to the bad days, which I think is a horrible time to be in, where it doesn't matter what a developer says to you, you have to instantly distrust them because of shit like this that's happened.
Yeah.
And that's a really bad way to be. And like I said, it's not often, it's a very small minority of these developers that do it. There are tons of indie developers out there that do great. You're talking about Muse Games, who made Guns of Icarus, Revolution, who made Broken Sword 5, which I loved. I thought it was a great entry into the series, and as you said, it delivered everything it's done. And then you've got, on the opposite side, you've got stuff like Double Fine's Broken Age, which is just still going on with the whole shit going on with there. They burnt more money than Molyneux did with this. At least they delivered an episode of their game. And then you've got,
8 episodes.
8 episodes, yeah. And, you've got Goddess here with Peter Molyneux. And it feels to me, when they do this sort of thing, this is the most frustrating thing with this whole thing. And, because we're turning on to the end of the episode. The most frustrating thing that comes to me with all this is that you've got a small minority that are ruining what otherwise was a decent idea. And that was working.
It is a perfect system on paper, isn't it? But then again, so is communism, so threesomes.
Yeah.
But there's always going to be people to ruin a good idea, an actual good idea, Tom.
Whether through intent or through accident, because accidents happen that do cripple these sort of things, don't they?
Yeah, or maybe you believe that you could do something, and then either due to overcompensating, or you don't have the talent in your office to be able to complete that task, which is essentially what happened here. I firmly believe that it may not even be down to the talent that's in his office. I think the whole thing, and in generalization of the Peter Molyneux interview, is that as we said, he firmly believes, and I believe that he believes, as you said, Tom, that when he said all this stuff, he honestly believed that was the case. But and maybe if you were to ask him then, are you banking, your success on this? And you probably say yes. But when you're playing around with other people's money, then that's dodgy. Maybe that's the main reason why he doesn't have a reputation in the industry anymore. I think that's down to the things he said and done. Going to that. Is there anything else that you guys want to cover? We've got about 10 minutes left, I'd say.
No, it's just what you should always do with all your products. Keep an eye on it, make sure, and invest carefully.
Yeah.
Don't expect, if they do promise a lot, make sure they can live up to it.
Yeah, and I think as we said earlier, if you're looking for reviews of the game, don't trust reviews that say, "Well, at a later date, all this stuff it'll fix everything." Just do what it is there now.
There's one game that we play on early access that's that's disappointed me a little bit. It's 7 Days to Die.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
That was our Valentine's Day game.
What, last year?
Yeah, we renamed Valentine's Day Zombie Day, so we wear matching T-shirts and play zombie games
And eat Chinese food.
and eat Chinese food.
That's cute. That's cute. So
the couple that slays together stays together.
So 7 Days to Die. What's happened with that then? Because it's obviously been in early access for ages.
It's still in early access, I think.
It's Alpha 11 right now, so it's not. So it's still on its basic model. It's not even in beta yet.
It's had a lot of updates in the past year, but it's still pretty much, Minecraft idea, and it's kind of just Minecraft, but with more zombies and slightly better graphics.
Yeah, I think with Minecraft they have their own aesthetic, don't they, to the whole thing. Here's another conversation into it. This is probably started up. Here's how I would do Steam Early Access. I would do 2 years tops, just as a generalization.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd also make it that if you're planning in any way, shape, or form to add microtransactions into your early access game, you are not allowed on Steam.
Not early access.
Transactions.
Yeah, no microtransactions. The amount of early access games that have microtransactions, and people wonder why they don't come out of beta when they're getting money through microtransactions. That's why they're not coming out of beta.
Yeah, they actually need something to they need a carrot on a stick.
Yes.
That's just trying to squeeze money out of the money you've already got. That's like
if you do microtransactions, you're getting bits of carrot.
Yeah.
So you don't need to follow that carrot on the stick.
One of the things as well that maybe is a talking point in terms of Steam is that you might release a game on Steam. You've got like a window of maybe like a week where you're featured on like the front page. If you stay in early access, there isn't that many games to fight with on early access. So you're going to get way more. In that kind of way of looking at it, you get way more publicity. You get way more exposure. Is the word.
I actually did a calculation. Actually, just reminded me, and worked out there's about 220 early access games on Steam currently.
Yeah, as opposed to the tens of thousands of games that you can purchase. From
exactly.
Steam. So you don't have. You get a much smaller. And let's face it, like if you've got a successful game that's released normally, then there's a lot of successful games that you have to battle with to get exposure. If you've got a successful game that's in early access, arguably you've got 10 games that are hugely popular in early access. So you don't have that much to contend with there, and you're always going to be featured on the top there in the new releases. Most popular.
Also, if you're slightly cheaper, then you're winning, because if you're slightly cheaper than the full price game, because a lot of people will go to early access because they're supposed to be cheaper.
Yeah, because technically then you're going to get what you think is, going to be the finished product, but you can get it for a bit cheaper now, and you get to play it a little bit earlier. Awesome. Yeah. Sounds good all around. I think that was the initial. So I think that's the main reason why everyone hopped on the Minecraft bandwagon. And, at very least, and I don't have a bad word to say about Mojang, they delivered what I think is a hugely groundbreaking game in Minecraft. And I don't think anyone can argue with that.
So many people have ripped it off already, haven't they?
I've seen a lot of those on Steam, actually. Block Adventurers and all that nonsense.
Castle Miner.
Block and Load or something.
Yeah.
Let alone Steam. There's loads on the tablets and on the.
That's how you know you've got a successful model.
Yeah, exactly. When you've got just flat out rip off games. In regards to that. I remember there was one on like the Xbox before the Xbox version of Minecraft came out. There was a game called Castle Miner, and it was basically a Minecraft rip-off. And me and Matt Marsander from the show, you literally played tons of it, and we were only playing it, and the only reason we played it is because we couldn't have Minecraft on the Xbox. And then when it got released on the Xbox, we're like, okay, we're buying that. We never played it after that.
Jump ship to the better place.
Yeah, we went to greener pastures, and the grass was greener the other side. So and more pixelated.
Literally.
Yeah. Okay. Anything small you guys want to add in before I wrap this episode up? I think it's been really interesting.
I have noticed, because I've played a few games on early access. Neo Scavenger, The Escapists. A lot of I think my pattern that I've tend to notice, and this might just be complete bullshit, but if games focus more on really retro designs, like the vintage stuff you see from the 90s, from your old PC, early 90s kind of thing.
Like RPG Maker.
Like RPG Maker. Something like that, but...
Yeah.
The 2D, quite big, pixelated games, they tend to succeed quite well.
That work more on like artistic, like not so much like I know exactly what you mean, like, because you've got a lot of like talented artists from back in that day and age that could just whip that shit up in their sleep, and
it's just you can do. I say the guys that did Sunless Sea, they actually said they wanted to stick with a 2D engine because they feel like they could do a lot more creatively speaking. Because if you're spending too much time in your graphics, you're not spending time elsewhere in the game, and as we all know, graphics does not a game make.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we all said about how a pile of shit with glitter on it still makes it a pile of shit.
Yeah, it still smells like poo. Yeah,
a polished turd is a polished turd.
Yeah. Or what the theme I like to say is all style, no substance. I said that about Destiny. I love that phrase. All style, no substance.
That's more eloquent than sparkly shit. So.
I don't know. I think sparkly shit is pretty good. I have to say, glittery poo. That's pretty good.
That is actually what we should call a bad game. It's so good. It's a game so bad. It's actually good.
Yeah, that you can enjoy how bad it is. Just
yeah, like 50 Shades of Grey. It's got a massive hype and I presume
nothing
good
redeemable
actors,
about
but still porn.
There is nothing redeemable about 50 Shades of Grey. It doesn't even have good porn.
Yeah, I think even the movie doesn't have like good sex scenes. I've heard the movie shit. Even for people that like the book. And I fucking
I heard it was 15 minutes worth of sex scenes actually, the whole movie.
But it's more like softcore, like when I mean softcore, like I'm not expecting like hardcore porn, but like.
Do you know why I call it porn? Because it's like a fantasy film, a fantasy pornographic, where the person is fantasizing about abusing this girl, abusing her emotionally, sexually, and verbally. So. Do you know, it's like, it's porn. There may not be that much sex in it, but it's porn for the abusive factor.
Have you read the book? I know this is going off.
I managed to get up to chapter 1, and then that was it. I had enough of it. It's so badly written.
All the sex and all the... I don't mind. I read erotica, right? Really good erotica.
I've read erotica before. I'm not ashamed to admit.
The thing is that I dislike about the book, and because I haven't read it all the way through, I can't comment about its plot. I can't comment about how offensive it is in terms of people that have been in abusive relationships and how dangerous it might be. The one thing I can say, however, is that it's really badly written.
Yes,
as a book.
That's why I couldn't do it.
Really, really bad, really badly written.
I couldn't actually get past the chapter where they actually writ out the contract for Anastasia properly. And it's just sitting at the back of one of my shelves, and I look at it and just think I could continue reading that, but then again, I could hardball cocaine and meth. So,
Can I just say, right, I have actually spoken to a publisher and a literary agent. Both have said, as advice for writers, do not do standing in front of a mirror and describing yourself. That is their one pet hate, and that is across the board for so many different agents and publishers. How that got through to be put on paper,
I know,
and that to be read, I have no idea.
Yeah. It's because it was controversial and it was a little bit risque. But when you look at that, I read erotica that's dirtier than that, but much better written. I read erotica that has far, I can't talk about its plot, but it's had excellent story, great characters, but it's very sexually charged. I've got no issue.
But we all don't care about the story. We just care about the naughty scenes. And I got to say, I read the first naughty scene, and I was nothing.
It's just badly written.
From that.
Outright badly written. There's no way to get around it.
It's just great.
And you don't have to be you don't have to be someone that reads a lot of books to know it's badly written. Really?
Apparently you do, because it's really popular.
Oh, yeah. But I would argue that a large majority...
A lot of people don't honestly know about BDSM and good literature.
Yeah, I would argue that a lot of people probably purchased the book because of it being, like, a phase. It was... How many people did... I did the Ice Bucket Challenge, but,
as well.
The amount of people that did the Ice Bucket Challenge and didn't make any contribution towards charity because it was just an ice bucket. Oh, everyone's doing it, I have to do it, and it became this thing of everyone's buying the book. I need to buy the book because it's such a thing. I imagine the majority of people bought the book and read it because it was a thing rather than I wanted to buy the book.
I think I have a family of hipsters. We got the book from someone else who bought it, who's blah. Anyway, my brother did the Ice Bucket Challenge. He was told to do the Ice Bucket Challenge, but he didn't do it because he didn't see the point. And people ripped on him, saying, "Oh, I can't believe you're not doing it. Where's your charitable thing?" And he said, so he put as a response, instead of going to buy ice and wasting that money, I'm going to donate £5 to Water Aid, or however much I think it was actually £15 he donated to Water Aid. And
still donated to the Ice Bucket Challenge charity.
Yeah, and to the MS charity.
ALS.
Instead of wasting water and ice.
I think that the best Ice Bucket Challenge was Patrick Stewart's.
Oh, yes.
Outright. And
Yes.
if you guys haven't seen it, people who are listening that haven't seen it, YouTube that shit. It is divine. I love it.
Just go YouTube it.
Motherfucking sir.
Yeah, it is. He is the Mac Daddy, Mr. Stewart.
That's just because that is how you do it.
Just to say now, before we wrap up, that if we get enough comments and likes, one thing we should do as a special episode is reading out our favourites or least favourite parts of 50 Shades of Grey.
We have to audition parts of who does the dialogue.
Wow.
Who's gonna narrate it though? Because that's the worst thing. I mean, the dialogue's bad, but the writing's shit.
I think we do need to employ a variety of. I do say now. Whoever voices Grey should try and channel Tim Curry.
Really? Yeah.
Actually, no. I'll voice Grey, and one of you two voice Anastasia. That would be funny.
Yeah.
Sorry, who would voice Anastasia?
One of you two. You'd have to fight. Fight.
No, we would take it in turns, and we'd have to do our girliest voices.
We might have to do that. Just fuck it. I don't even ever get likes just to do it. Just be funny. Just to do like a chapter and just do a reading and see if we can keep it together. I doubt we would. We would
have to find the. I'm going to use quote unquotes here. The sauciest chapter. And try and read that.
I'll tell you what, right? If we're going to do it legit, what we do is that I'll do the narration, I'll do the chatting and everything like that, and I'll let you guys do the main characters. We'll see how long we can go before we crack. I don't think it'll be long. I think personally for me, I might tap out. That
is going to be our April Fool's podcast.
Yes, definitely.
No, I've got a good idea. You two do the main character and I'll do the narration.
Yeah, that's actually kind of good.
Your burliest voice you could.
I should do like really gruff Hugh Jackman for Mr. Grey.
No. Not
you.
Chris Bale's Batman.
I'll take you right on the table.
Oh no!
I'll tie you down
as Anastasia.
Okay, but guys.
I could do my get in my van voice. Oh, get in my van. Nah.
We have to try a lot of voices for Grey. I want to do my East London gangster.
Okay, well, we'll practice this. But guys, we can't do a Molyneux. We have to deliver on our promises.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah.
And it'll be the best thing you've ever seen. It will make the world explode. No, we won't do that. All right, guys. Brilliant. I've got to wrap up.
Okay.
You guys.
I do want to say one thing before we go, though, just to say that I hope that Molyneux does manage to stay stable and, gets the support he needs to keep going and doesn't beat himself up so much like he has here, because
he sounded defeated. Yeah.
He needs to.
I don't know if he has actually got. Did you say he has actually got depression?
Well, he said that.
He does, and if he does, just all the luck in the world to him.
It's not that. I just hope he gets the support, because it's a serious thing that people take for granted, and it's not easy to deal with. So you're dealing with that and running your own business.
Yeah, he really needs to just finish this game and take some time for him.
Yeah,
that'd be good.
Ultimately,
yeah. And I would just advise him, if he ever would listen, we can only dream, that he works with a publisher. Don't work by your own virtues, because you can't hack this, Pete. I'm sorry.
It seems like too much. Yeah.
We'd love you to, but with the way you talk to the press, just no. It will destroy you, mate.
Go all bohemian on us and just be one of those developers that doesn't say a thing to anyone, that just delivers great games every now and then. Everyone thinks he's a visionary. Become that guy. We'll be happy with that, Doesn't say a word. Everyone's clamouring to get interviews with. No, I'm not saying a thing, because
I'll tell you what, though, if he did pull that off, he would be the smuggest bastard in this industry, and he would thoroughly deserve it.
We would tip our hat to him, but hopefully. Alright guys, let's wrap up here. It's been a cool episode. I think a really interesting conversation, and any of our listeners, if you'd like to leave comments in regards to what you think about it and talking points in the future, we're more than happy to do that. But for this week, it's been really interesting. We thank you for sharing the time with us for the Kittens Gaming of War. getting all wrong now. Kittens Wargaming podcast. And we hope to catch you again for another episode next week. So bye everyone.
Bye guys.
Bye.
See you next week.